All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the AIA Contract Documents Best Practices for Editing Documents in the Online Service. So my name is Sarah. I'll be taking you through kind of a presentation for the next 40 minutes or so, and then towards the last 20 minutes of the presentation, we'll hear from Will Harris and Ariel Enriquez, who work with our technical support team at AIA Contract Documents. So you'll have a chance to ask them questions and they can get those answered for you. Again, that'll be towards the end of the presentation. So what we have in store for you for the next hour or so, I'm going to start with just a quick review of the online service. I'll just take about 5 minutes to go over the layout of the AIA Contract Documents online service, just review how it works. I know some of our audience members use it every day, whereas others of you may have not been in there for a while, so a quick review might be beneficial. Then I'll go through some general best practices, just some notes about how you can best be using the online service day to day. Then I'll go through and offer some tips on organizing your projects, different ways that you can use the online service to keep things organized, especially when you have a lot of documents for a project and your projects get complicated. Next, I'll go through personalizing your account. We'll review adjusting your settings and creating custom templates for your account. And then finally, for the last 20 minutes or so, I'll moderate a question and answer session in which you can ask Will and Ariel your questions about using the online service. So as they come up throughout the presentation, just feel free to type those into GoToWebinar as we're going along here so I can get them queued up for Will and Ariel at the end. So with that, everyone will be receiving an email that includes a recording of today's presentations, as well as the slides and any follow-up information, so you can expect to receive that. So let's get started. So we're going to start our quick review here. You have the online service. When you log into the online service, this is what it looks like. You have these 4 main tabs up here that essentially dictate the organization of how everything is laid out. So you have your Home tab, your Projects tab, which is where you're going to be creating new projects, adding your project team, and then creating and finalizing documents from there. We're going to talk a little bit about, in this presentation, creating drafts from the Projects tab. This is the tab where most of your document management capabilities are going to happen. Next, we have the Template Library tab. This has all of our standard AIA templates. There are lots of different ways you can use the template library to browse the different templates to find the best one for your project. Mainly, this tab is used for looking around and browsing the templates, as well as creating a custom template, which we'll go over as well. And then finally, you have your Contacts tab. So this has a master list of all of your contacts. Eventually, you assign your contacts to your project team in your Projects tab, and that's whose information should be populating into your document drafts. Then finally, up here, you have your name. You may have that linked to the company settings panel if you're an administrator for a multi-user account, but if you're not, that's okay. Everyone should have that My Settings button up at the top there. We're going to be talking about that in just a little bit. So just to take a step back here and review how a document goes from draft to final in the online service, just to keep you oriented on how we go through here, you start with that standard AIA template that you find in the template library. You can browse around in there. Once you choose one, you create a draft using that template, and then you edit that draft in one of 2 ways. So the first is online editing. By default, your forms, so the G-series documents, such as your payment applications and change orders, when you create a draft using those templates, they're going to open in the online editor. Then you'll make your edits directly in there. Otherwise, for your agreements, so your other contracts, they're going to open by default in offline editing, which means they'll download as a Microsoft Word document onto your computer. So then you'll make your edits in the Microsoft Word document and re-import into your project in the online service. So either way, You'll end up finalizing that draft, and that'll give you a final locked PDF that's going to be variance checked, which means that your changes will be marked in the final, either throughout the document or at the very end in an additions and deletions report. So that's all I got for you in terms of review. I did promise that it would be quick. I really want to get into some of these best practices and just make sure we're getting all of the content in here. We have lots to cover. So starting with just, again, those general best practices, the first is that you should be creating your drafts from the Projects tab. So when you're in the Projects tab here, make sure you're using that Create Document button when you're actually going to create a document draft. If you are creating, or if you're trying to create document drafts from downloading a template from the template library, that template is going to be blank. So by creating a draft from the Projects tab, that's a good way of making sure that your project details are going to automatically populate into those gray boxes in your document drafts. Our next best practice for you is editing offline for your agreements. So I mentioned earlier that by default, your agreements, not to be confused with your forms, but your agreements, your contracts are going to, by default, open in Microsoft Word. We recommend leaving it that way, especially if you want to use complex edits for your draft. So when I say complex edits, that can refer to copying and pasting from different documents. It can include inserting tables, inserting pictures, bulleted lists, things like that. So especially if you're making these edits, we do recommend leaving the defaults as is and editing offline for agreements. Our next tip for you is to keep those chevrons. So when you are editing offline, you're going to see that your document or your project details will auto-populate into these boxes. You're going to see these little chevrons here. You see them every time your project details are auto-populated. You're welcome to work within the chevrons, but it is important that you leave them there. Once you go to finalize the document, you can see that they do go away. So we know that they're not visually appealing for the drafts, but they do include important coding that helps format your documents later on. So just leaving those there, you're welcome to work within them so you can edit text inside the chevrons. But make sure you leave them there, do not delete them, because when you go to finalize, they will be removed. And that can avoid any potential formatting issues that may come about by deleting the chevrons. Our next tip here is to keep those italicized instructions. So throughout the document, you're going to see these type of italicized instructions. We recommend leaving them there. If you go through and delete all of them, then it may result in some formatting trouble later on. It is standard practice just to leave those italicized instructions be. Next is going to be to import and finalize without reopening. So when you're editing offline, as you know, you work in Microsoft Word, and then you go and you import your draft into your file. It is best to import that Word document and then immediately finalize, rather than importing and re-downloading the Word document from the online service, making additional edits, and then re-importing. It is best that if you want to make any additional edits after you've already imported a draft, we recommend going into the original file, making those edits, and then just importing another draft from that original file, rather than downloading that draft from the online service before re-importing. And again, that can save you some formatting trouble down the road. Next is when you're working online, you want to save those online drafts frequently. So I mentioned this if you've taken the basics training, I have mentioned this as well. The online editor, even though it is an online editing software, it doesn't quite work like Google Docs in that your changes aren't going to be automatically saved. You want to treat working in the online editor like you would treat working in a Word document or if you're working in Excel, in that you want to save occasionally, especially after you've made big changes. So when you have that online draft, you want to click that Save As. Once you save a document the first time, it's going to engage an autosave feature and it's going to start saving every 5 minutes. But again, you want to go ahead and save that anytime you've made major changes. You don't want to lose all your work if your computer crashes or if something happens with your Wi-Fi. It has tragically happened to many of us. We don't want it to happen to you in the online editor, so just save those online drafts frequently. So next we're going to move into some tips for organizing your projects. Again, we're moving pretty quickly here. We have lots to cover, but whenever you have a question, go ahead and enter that in the GoToWebinar box and I'll get them queued up for our Q&A session. Also, if you'd like to see anything demonstrated along the way or repeated, we're going to go through some short live demos a little later, but if you want something demonstrated again, feel free to put that in questions. So moving right along here to tips on organizing your projects, there are a few features in the online service that not everyone knows is there that can really help you organize your projects, because we know that sometimes you're uploading lots of document drafts or external files and things can get pretty complicated. So the first thing I wanted to show you was creating subfolders. So you can actually create subfolders within your project folders, and you can either move your documents into those subfolders or you can create copies to organize your different documents. And you can do that by going in the Projects tab here and then right-clicking on your project title, and that's going to give you the option to create a folder. So we're going to see how to actually use these subfolders in a live demonstration here in just a second. We're going to see the difference between moving a document and copying a document and how you can use these subfolders best for you in terms of organizing your project. The next helpful tip I'm going to share with you is using distribution lists. So distribution lists can be helpful when you're using the online service to email documents around, or if you're working in the online editor and you're using that share for review feature. So again, we're going to see how to do this in a live demonstration in just a second, but you can designate a list of names and emails, whether or not they're in your project team, to show up when you go to actually email a document around. And we're going to see that that is this distribution list option in the Projects tab. So let's take a second to actually go into the online service and demonstrate a few things we just went over. So we're going to go over distribution lists and subfolders. So let me go into the online service here. I'm logged into a demo account here. I'm in the Projects tab. The first thing I'm going to show you is creating subfolders. So I'm going to go in here to one of my projects. I'm going to right-click. So that's where you get the option to create a folder. And from there, you get a little subfolder here that you can then name. So when I click on my subfolder here in phase 1, you're going to see that there are no documents in the folder currently. So when you create a subfolder under a project document, it doesn't automatically absorb all of the documents in that main project folder. When you want to move a project or a document into a subfolder, what you want to do is go to your View All Documents window. And then you can go to the More Actions over here. And you can either move or copy your document to the subfolder. So say we want to move this A201. We want to move it. That's going to bring up a list of my folders. I'm going to expand my Falls Road project here and select the subfolder I'd like to move it to. Now, If you notice, it has disappeared from my main folder, so that document, because we moved it, no longer lives in that main group project folder. But we can find it here in our phase 1 subfolder. So there it is. And if you want, you can always move it back. So if you want to keep everything available in your main project folder, but you also want to organize them into subfolders, another option is you can go in here and say, for example, I want to move this G701, or I want to copy it. I want it to be available both in the main project folder and in that phase 2 subfolder. So I'm going to click copy, and then I'm going to copy the document. So it's still showing up here. And when I go to my phase 2, it's showing up there as well at the bottom. So that's the difference between copying and moving and how you can use subfolders to organize. The next thing I'm going to show you that we reviewed is this distribution list feature. Again, this is how you designate a list of contact names and emails to use when you email documents around. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I'm in the right folder here, or the right project, and I'm going to click distribution list. And this is where you can either select contacts, for example. If you have a set of emails that's already in your contact library, you can do that. If it's not someone who's in your contact library, you can just add it from scratch as well. So then once you've designated a distribution list here, here's where it will show up. It will show up in 2 different situations. So the first is when you're working, if you just want to email a document around as an attachment. So say I have a list of names that want to receive a change order every time it's finalized, for example. So I'm going to go here to my View All Documents window, and I'm going to press Email. That's going to automatically include this G701 as an attachment in my email. And when I go up here and scroll all the way down, I see my distribution list is pulled apart. So I can easily access those emails, email that around. So that can save you some time if you are emailing documents from the online service. The other time a distribution list is helpful is if you're working online. So I'm going to open up this online draft here. And if you're using that Share for Review feature. So when I click Share for Review, this is a way of sending in review invites if you're working online, and you see this Select from Distribution List option here. And that's where my distribution list is going to show up. So if you are emailing documents around from the online service, that's where distribution lists can be helpful. So I'm going to return to the presentation here, and we'll get some more best practices before we return to the live demonstration. So the next few best practices we'll go over is personalizing your account. These can be particularly helpful if you're using the online service pretty frequently. This is how a few different ways that you can customize your experience a little bit to save yourself some time and effort. So the first is adjusting your default settings. So we saw that earlier, that My Settings link in the top right of the screen. You can use your default settings to adjust a few different things. You can switch between online and offline editing. You can set your different document preferences. You can insert a digital signature placeholder. We get this question a lot. If you are planning to use digital signatures for your documents, you can insert a placeholder when you go to finalize your documents in your default settings. You can also monitor your account storage and make sure you don't have to purchase any additional storage, and just make sure you're doing okay there. So again, you can do that through the My Settings option up there. So again, if you are using the online service frequently, I do encourage you to take a look in your settings and see what kind of things that you can adjust, just to again personalize that experience and save yourself a little bit of time when you're editing and finalizing documents. The next thing I'll go through is creating a custom template. So any agreement you can create in Microsoft Word, you can turn into your own custom template. So if you're using one standard template repeatedly and you have the same changes you make every time, it may be personal preference, it may be company approved language, things like that. If you want to save yourself some time, you can create your own custom template. And that's going to be under the Template Library tab. We're going to go over this in a live demonstration in just a second, but when you click on that Custom Templates sub-tab, then you can use that Import Template button. And again, this is how you can use custom templates for offline editing. So we're going to go through that right now. And we're going to jump back into the online service here. And we're going to go to our Template Library tab. So say, for example, you use the B105 repeatedly, but you're always changing the same amount. You're maybe adding the same language. You may be taking out some of the same language, and you just want to create your own custom template. So again, you'll notice when I downloaded template from the Template Library tab, these project details are going to be blank. For now, that's okay because we're creating a custom template. If these are ever blank and you don't intend them to be, make sure that you're creating your draft from the Projects tab and that you have all of these parties assigned to your project team under your project. So we'll make some example edits here just so you can see. This would be part of our custom template. And just like you would do when you're offline editing, you would save it to your computer. And then you'd return to the online service. We're still in the Template Library tab here. I'm going to go to my Custom Templates tab and import that template for use. So then once I've imported that template, it's going to be saved online in my template library. And that's important to know just because you can use this template whenever you log into the online service. So then when I go to my Projects tab and I go to create a document, I can go to my Custom sub-tab here, choose my custom template, and it will download just like it would a standard template. And my project details are going to be auto-populated into these boxes. And you'll see here that my sample edits have automatically been incorporated. So you can use it just like you would anytime. So that's a standard practice of how you can use the custom template feature for offline templates. We're going to take a second for questions here. I'm going to give a minute or two for you to go ahead and type in some of those questions, and I'll get them queued up. And then we'll switch it over to tech support so that they can go ahead and answer those. So go ahead and send those in right now if you haven't already. I'm just going to give it a few seconds to come in here. All right, so one question I see coming in here that I will take on for right now is whether when you're copying a document into a subfolder, will edits be made to the subfolder document reflecting the main level? This is a good question. So let me go into the online service here, and we'll go over what we mean. So when you have a document copied in, so for example, we have this G701 as a copy, in phase 2, and we also have it reflected in the main group folder. These documents are not linked, so any changes you make to one or the other will not be reflected in the other one. Of course, when you copy finals, those finals are just that, finals. But when you are copying drafts and when you're moving drafts, it's something to be aware of, that they are not linked, so any changes you make to one will not automatically be incorporated in the other. All right, so I'm also getting a request to do a demo of just downloading an original AIA template and then re-uploading that after changes. I'm happy to go through that. I'll take a few questions before I go through that, just because that can be, we'll do a couple live demos at the end all at once. So first, I just want to check in on my tech team. Will and Ariel, are you guys on the line and ready to answer a few questions? So based on the feedback we're getting in, I'm going to use the next few minutes or so to just go through a live demonstration. I'm seeing requests here just to go over editing a standard template offline and then re-importing, and also entering project details, a project team, and creating a custom template. All right, so I'm going to start in my projects tab here. The first thing I'm going to do to demonstrate is creating a new project. So AIA contract documents are what we call project-centric, which means that they are organized by project. So before you start creating a document, we recommend that you first create a project. And then when you go through here, this is how you enter your project details. So this is partially the information that will be auto-populating into those gray boxes you see there. So I'm just going to go through here. You would enter these project details, things like your contract sum, your location. I'm just going to enter some example data here. So then when you save, oops, I already have one called that. So then when you save, it's going to show up over here on the left. The next step is to add your project team. So when I add my project team, this is how I designate which of my contacts are going to be associated with this project. So again, I click project team. I'm going to click add team member here. Then I'm going to select, if you don't already have your contacts or your project team in your contact library, no worries. You can do that by clicking create new contact. And I select any related parties here. So then I have my project team. Again, once you have your project team, if you want to make any edits to them, you can go into the contacts library. These are essentially linked to your contacts master list here. So then once I have my project details and my project team, that's when I can then press create document. That brings up this list of my standard AIA templates. So when I choose a standard template, let's do E104, for example. I know that's not too long. By default, since this is an agreement, I'm going to click on the title here. And that's going to download as a Microsoft Word document onto my computer. And these are where my project details are going to auto-populate. So if you'll notice, this is the contact information that I have from my owner that I assigned to my project team. This is the architect in my project team. That's their information. And these are my project details. From there, you can just go in and make any edits you'd like. And then you go ahead and save that to your computer. It doesn't matter where you save it as long as you can find it later. And then you're going to return to the online service. You're still in the Projects tab. You still have your project selected. And you're going to press Import File. And that's where you're going to import that document draft. So that's going to import to your project in draft form. And that's where you can then go in and finalize the document. And you can go ahead and click Finalize there. That's when you select how your changes are marked. And you need your signing authority, shows up at the end on a certification of authenticity. And that gives you your final document. And there it is. So that's kind of an overview that I saw about adding the project details, project team, editing offline. I do have a request to go over the process for the custom template again, which I'm happy to do. So again, if you want to create a custom template, you can start at the template library here. I can download an example blank template. So when I click on a template from the library here, it'll download as blank. So these boxes don't have any information. That's because they're not tied to a project. So there's nothing telling the online service what details that go into the architect because it's not tied to any particular project team. But again, since we're making a template, that is fine. So you'll make any changes you like. And very similarly, you'll save to your computer. And then you'll return to the online service. You'll go to custom templates here, and then you can import that template. And then you'll have it. When you go to create a document from the projects tab. And we'll see that in just 1 second. So in both online or offline editing and creating a template for offline editing use, you're downloading something in Microsoft Word, making your changes, and then re-importing it, whether that's to the custom template library or to your projects. So then just a quick note, when I go to create a document, I can find my custom template that we just made on the custom templates tab. And there it is. Also getting a request in here to go over the digital signatures. I can show you where that is. I don't have DocuSign or digital signature software on my computer, so it won't quite look the same. But if I go up to my settings here and I go to document, there's this little option that says include digital signature placeholders. By default, it's set to never, but you can opt to ask it each time you finalize a document or always. So for example, I'm going to set it to ask each time. So then when I go to finalize a document, I get this little guy here that asks if I want written, which is the regular, or digital. So let's go ahead and finalize with the digital so you can see where the placeholder is. Again, if you have that online or that digital signature software, it will include a little box for that. If I do not have that, it kind of looks like this. It is blank because you do need a software for it. But this is essentially what the placeholder looks like. It will have a page on there for you. So I'm getting one more question for Will and Ariel here. If you have any others, feel free. Let me get that up on the screen. So, for Will and Ariel. All right. Is there any way to get spell check on a G701 document? I'm getting some more in here. Here's another one for you. This is about digital signatures. And if you don't have the signature software, I'm just using Adobe PDF this time. All right, thanks, Will. We've got another question on digital signatures here, whether we're under the project setting. Let me go to that one more time. It's actually just under your document settings. Thanks, Will. So our next question up here is, how do I sign up for email notifications? All right, thanks, Will. I have another question in here that I can demonstrate with a live demo, and that's what is the difference between the clean and comparative variance check. So let me go back into the online service here to answer that. So we're going to go to our projects tab and we're going to finalize a document just to demonstrate the difference. So when you go to finalize your documents, you don't have to worry about this with forms, but for agreements, your changes to the standard template language are somehow going to be marked in a final, and we call that your variance check. So when you go to finalize this document, we'll ask for clean or comparative. Clean means that your changes will be marked not throughout the document, but all the way at the end in additions and deletions report. Comparative means they're marked throughout. So when we click on clean here, we're going to see, as we open this up, that the only indication that a change was made, so an addition or deletion, is this little line here on the left margin. And we see that throughout. So we see here these edits we made. There was a deletion here. And all the way at the end, we're going to see this additions and deletions report. And that goes by page and just marks where the changes were made. So here's where our deletions are stricken through and our additions are underlined. If you opt for comparative, that's going to have your changes marked throughout the document wherever you had originally made them. So whether you choose clean or comparative, so we see here that our deletion is stricken through and our addition is underlined directly in there. It's a personal preference, it's up to you. The clean, of course, is a cleaner look, but it may be a little bit harder to follow where the changes are made. The comparative is a little easier to follow along with, but not quite the cleanest look. And with the comparative, you do not have that additions and deletions report. I'm also getting a request here to go through filtering and searching through project teams and documents. So let me go in here. So say I have a ton of documents, in my project. So let me start from the base project tab. When I click view all documents down here, I get to this document management window that lists all the documents. Now, if you know what you want, you can immediately start searching up here at the search documents bar. But you can also filter. So for example, if I want to just pick out my drafts, I can go up here to type, and then I can click this vertical ellipses here, and then I can filter. Say I want the Word document. That's how you filter within that header. So right now I'm in type, and then I can filter by Microsoft Word. And if I'm done with that, I can exit out. And then I have my document. And these same filtering techniques apply to, for example, our project team. You have the same thing here. If I want to filter by category, I can click and drag, and that sorts it by category. If I want to search within or filter within the category, and I can look, for example, for my architect, filter, and then I have my architect. And this can be very helpful if you have a very long list. So it looks like that's about a wrap with our questions and our demonstration requests. So I'm going to go ahead and send you home here with some contacts and resources. I mentioned the Learn page earlier. You'll receive that information. And that includes all of our upcoming trainings and webinars. It also includes helpful articles. And I'm also going to send you the contact information for our 2 different support teams. If you have any questions about using the online service, any lingering questions, anything that comes up, you have our tech support team. And if you have any questions about the content of the documents, we have what we call our docinfo line. So you can give either one of these teams a call or an email at any time. If you have any questions, they're both great. So again, you'll receive that as a follow-up from Contract Documents. And thank you, everyone, for attending. I think we covered very good information. We had some great questions. So have a great rest of your day, and you can expect a follow-up email from us. And thank you, Will and Ariel, for attending and answering our questions.